Okay, so I'm gonna change the way I'm doing this. I felt like the TikToks I was like super rushed and I couldn't get everything I need to say in the minute time. So I'm just gonna record a whole long video of me speaking about what we've read. So this is for pages, I believe 22 through 46, and that was before spring break that you should have read this. So at this point, Ellie and his family are put on cattle cars, and this is an absolutely awful experience. So they have little to no food and little to no space. So like basically, if you decide to stand, you're about to stand for days, or if you're gonna stay, you're gonna sit for days. Like literally, people are having to go to the bathroom on themselves or in the corner. Just an absolutely awful experience. But Ellie explains one of the worst parts of this experience is a lady named Madame Schechter. And in this section, he basically is explaining that she's literally hallucinating and going crazy on this cattle car. So she'll wake up in her sleep and just start screaming that there's a fire. Okay, and she does it, and at first they're like, okay, shut up, lady. But she keeps doing it over and over again. And at some point, like the other Jewish people in the cattle car start to get so frustrated with her that they literally start to beat her and like choke her and scream at her. And Ellie explains that her son is just sitting there watching the whole thing. And it's kind of one of those moments he's like, I can't believe that they're doing this to her, but also like her son's not doing anything. But he's also like, he's probably terrified that his mom is literally going crazy in this cattle car. And the craziest part of this whole thing is at the end of this chapter, um, Madame Schechter wakes up and is like saying that she can see a fire, and all of a sudden there's a huge fire, and they've reached their camp. And Ellie says they smell this awful smell, and they realize that it's literally the smell of burning flesh. So it's kind of like, was she so crazy after all? They end up at a fire. Um, so they get to the camp, and Ellie says that his dad and him are split from his mom and sister, and he says in the book that this is the last time that he sees them um, forever. And so they're split up, and somebody in the camp, another prisoner, tells them to lie about their age so that they have less of a chance of getting killed. And in this time, Ellie, we start to see him lose his faith very quickly, and it's a very big theme that we're going to see throughout the book. So they're standing in line, basically about to get thrown into the furnace, and Ellie sees babies being thrown in the furnace, children being thrown in the furnace, kind of like what Moshe the Beetle warned them about before. And in that time, he's not even been in the camp for an hour yet. Ellie sits there and thinks, what if I just threw myself into this electric fence and electrocuted myself? Like, should I do it? And he truly thinks about it. And you see him, he's like, okay, I'm going to go. I'm going to do it. And in that second, like right before he's about to electrocute himself, for some reason that no one will ever know, Ellie and his dad get sent to the barracks and they don't get sent to the furnace. And it's one of those things where you're sitting here like, holy cow. If he would have acted a second earlier, he wouldn't have lived and this book wouldn't have been written. And that's just one of the craziest moments in the story to me because he literally almost kills himself right there. And he doesn't. And we know he survives because he wrote the book, right? So it's just insane to me that they do live. And Ellie and his dad realize that if you're strong, then you have the job of throwing the dead bodies into either their graves or you throw bodies into the crematorium. So they decide that it's better to not be super strong because they don't want that job. So in this time, Ellie and his dad are shaved, their hair gets shaved, they get stripped of all their clothing, they get new clothes, everything that they had is gone, and they get sprayed completely from head to toe with this disinfectant spray. Um, and they see people that they knew, and they just started crying at the fact that they're all still alive, even though they are still alive. They're all just like, we're not even who we were before at this time in the story. And in the 24 hours that they're at the camp, Elliot explains that him and his dad have completely lost everything about themselves. So literally just in 24 hours, they've lost everything of who they were. They are only shells of who they are at this point. But at this point, even though Ellie has kind of already started to lose his faith, he does thank God for a second for mud. And he does that because he stepped in mud and it made his very new shoes look old. So when they were getting new clothes, the Nazi soldiers didn't take his shoes because they thought that they were old, worn down shoes, but actually they were newer shoes. So he thanks God, like, thank you so much for mud because my shoes would have been taken. I wouldn't have had shoes at this point. So again, at the end, another part, a soldier literally tells them, hey, if you're not going to work, you're going to get thrown into a furnace. And there's nothing good. There's literally nothing good that's going to happen from here on out, basically. And Ellie's quickly realizing that. So next we have Ellie's father getting beaten by one of the gypsy, like, soldiers. And this part is so crazy to me because Ellie doesn't do anything. And he knows, like, oh my gosh, like, after it happens, Ellie is like, wait, I'm no better one than Madam Schechter's son, right? But he says he's not sure if he didn't do anything because he was scared, right? Like, was I scared personally that I was going to get in trouble? Or if, like, he was literally just numb to any sort of pain at all. Like, he couldn't tell if it was because he was terrified or if because at this point in his life, in the 24 plus hours he's been there, if he just, like, was numb to anything like that and it didn't even faze him. And it's this huge point for Ellie where he's like, I literally didn't even stand it for my own father. That was just getting beaten down. But we know Ellie's dad cares about him and he wants him to think that he's fine, so he lies. And it's like, it didn't even hurt at all, son, don't worry. But obviously, if you read the scene, you know there's no way that couldn't have hurt. Like, he was beaten. So at this point, Ellie and his dad are actually moved to at the head kind of camp in Auschwitz. And Ellie's first thought is that it's actually kind of nice. He's like, hey, it's not that bad from where we were before. And in their new barracks, they actually get a Polish, like, head kapos is what they call him in the book. And this kapos is so encouraging. And Ellie says that these are the first human words he's heard the entire time. And he says that because this is the only soldier that they've come across that is actually nice and encouraging to them. Everyone else is like, hey, you don't work, you get thrown into the fire. You don't do this, you die. And this soldier's like, you can do it. Keep your head up. You're going to make it. Focus on the good. And that's why Ellie says, like, these are the first human words he's heard because he's actually nice to them. Let me look at my notes to make sure I don't forget anything. So, for the first 3 days, Ellie doesn't eat his soup in this camp. And it's kind of weird because we know he's starving. But then after 3 days, he does end up eating. He can't not eat at this point. He's so hungry. And in this camp, they get their numbers that are tattooed on their body. So they don't even go by names anymore. They officially have numbers that they go by. And in this section, Ellie runs into an old relative, and his name is Stein. And Stein asks him if he's seen his kids, right? So he's like, oh my gosh, have you seen my kids? Like, I haven't seen my kids and wife since I got here. And in this section, Ellie lies to him, and he's like, yeah, I totally saw them right before we left. And Ellie decides, he's like, there was no point in lying to him. I wanted to give him some sort of hope. Like, there's so much bad going on that I wasn't going to tell him the truth, that I hadn't seen them and that they were probably dead. I wanted to give him hope that good things could happen. So Ellie does realize, like, he did lie, but he's just trying to keep this man alive. And he was like, at this point, there's no point in telling him the truth because so many bad things are happening. Like, this is just gonna be the end of it for him. So unfortunately, the Polish capo that was really nice gets moved because he was too nice. The prisoners, they get a new one that's even worse than the one they dealt with before. And Ellie's dad tries to save some of food for the next day because he's like, hey, if we're hungry now, imagine if we don't get food tomorrow, how hungry we're going to be. And so their friend Stein keeps visiting them, and he's basically telling them, you need to eat as much as you possibly can because the weak don't last long in here. If you're weak, you're going to go. So when you get food, you need to eat all of it. And in this part, he says, hey, I'm going to go. There's new transports. I'm going to check in, see if anyone's seen my wife and kids. And Ellie says after that time that he never saw Stein again. So this is one of those moments where we can assume that Stein found out the truth about his wife and kids, since they never heard of him again. When he found out that they probably were dead, it probably was, like Ellie had mentioned before, gave him no hope to keep going. And so it probably was that moment for him where he was like, you know what, this is it. I don't really have hope to live anymore, kind of thing, which is really unfortunate. But Ellie kind of says the same thing. He assumes that he found out the truth, considering he never saw them again. So again, Ellie keeps beginning to lose his faith in God even more and more as the days go on, and he keeps mentioning it. One really sad part in the end of this section to me is that his dad and him both keep lying to each other about his mom and sister, right? So he's like, every once in a while we chat and like talk about mom and sister, and he's like, none of us, I never say that I don't think they're alive, just in case he thinks they're alive. And Ellie says the same, like, I don't think my dad would ever say he doesn't think they're alive because he wouldn't want me to be upset. So they both continue to pretend like they think they're alive, knowing that the chances of them being alive are very, very slim, just because they don't want to upset the other person, which is kind of sad to me. Like, it's just so unfortunate. Like, they both know, but they know if they say it, it'll become real. And at the end of the section, Ellie and his dad are moved to a new camp. They're moved to Buna. And I find it interesting again that Ellie says on their way there, the Germans are, like, there's girls flirting with the soldiers. So instead of the German soldiers beating them like they usually would, like on their walks or when they're transporting them, they're like too distracted by the girls. So Ellie's kind of like, oh, it was like not as bad of a walk as usual because they were distracted. Which again is just so unfortunate. Like, that one thing changes how they act just because they don't want to look probably crazy in front of these girls, but they could do it in the camps without a care in the world, kind of thing. But Ellie and his dad are still alive at this point, and they have been moved. So this week we're going to see what their time is like in their new camp. They're going to get a new job at this point. Let me flip through and see some things that are going on. And we're just going to see the same kind of themes of Ellie continuing to lose his faith in God. Little things happening where you're like, holy cow, if this one thing didn't happen, so much would have been different. So yeah, and that's what we have. And that's like pages, I think 22 through 46 was that what I just recapped.